Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hollywood Wargaming. Today we are going to be looking at some new plastic kits for bolt action coming from Warlord Games. Very exciting times because we are getting some plastic French here. And coming off the heels of those Italians, it's really great to see Warlord Games updating their product line with great new miniatures. Ever since the Africa Corps and the British 8th Army kits have come out, I think Warlord Games has really honed in how their sprues need to be, and they've just done a great job of really making them very versatile and getting the most bang for your buck out of not just their molds and how they work, but also what you can build out of them. And with hindsight, with how France and Italy ended up by the end of World War II, we tend to kind of put them on the back burner a little bit, but I think it's really great that they're getting new kits. I think more people are going to start playing these factions. And hopefully by the time Bolt Action 3rd Edition rolls around, sometime within the next century, maybe we'll see some more robust rules for these factions, and they'll be as much in the focal range as the Big Four, which is, of course, the US, British, Russian, and German. And when you come at historical wargaming, you can come at it from two angles, where you're either really interested in a certain history. For example, I started collecting a bunch of the French Foreign Legion miniatures from Perry Miniatures, and I'm willing to put up with some of those older, outdated sculpts that are maybe not in the best condition nowadays, versus newer people who want to get in and collect cool new models that look good. And truth be told, I am a bit of both myself, and there's a nice crossover where if you have these new models that come out for a historical war game, people maybe want to buy those new models, and then when they do them, they start to get a little more attached painting them. They do a lot of research on the uniforms and such, perhaps on where they want to make them thematically based out of, and then you learn a little bit of history while you're hobbying. So there's that cool dynamic with historical war games, and I think it's really, really awesome that we're seeing some of the quote-unquote lesser factions of the Second World War getting updated model lines, and I'd like to see more of this stuff. I know I was a little hard on Warlord Games when the Italian kit came out because I felt like it was a little overdue, but it does feel like Warlord Games has really started cranking out the new plastic kits here over the last year. It feels like they blew the cobwebs off of the industrial line and just have really been going at it with the new kits, and they all look really good. So first up here, much like your standard infantry box set, this is going to be giving you 5 identical sprues, each containing 6 torsos to make a total of 30 French infantry units, or infantry models. And they are going to come in at $56 for the box, which is really not a bad box set nowadays. I mean, you look at Games Workshop and you're getting 10 squad members for about, $60 to $75 nowadays. And I want to remind some of the more gaming-oriented people in this hobby that, this is a hobby. It's not just you're buying them as game pieces. You're buying them for the entertainment value, if you would call it that, of sitting down, assembling them, and painting them. I know that's just pure torture for a lot of people in the hobby. It's a hurdle for everyone, even people like me who like doing it. But my point being is that 30 models is going to take a long time to paint if you take your time with it. Even if you don't, it's still, it's a considerable amount of time. So $56 for what I would consider to be maybe like a month worth of painting it's a pretty good deal. So totally fair box set for the price point that you're getting. Now, of course, if you're buying offline, there is the problem of shipping. So try and find a local game store that stocks Warlord games, or maybe, commute to one. They should be stocking these newer kits. And if they don't, put a word in. Say, hey, my group's maybe interested in bolt action. Could you guys order some kits? But I want to have a quick shout out here that this sprue does not have a guy in prone, which I know is something that a lot of people have a lot of I don't want to say complaints, but some people really like the guys in prone. Some people do not at all. I'm kind of in between. I like them at first, but I've kind of figured out over the years that it always ends up being the kind of like a spotter or something, or a sniper or an anti-tank rifle. It always ends up being the model that I end up not using a lot. And that does kind of affect the value when you rebuy the box, maybe 3 or 4 times. But overall, it's not that big of a deal, but I know some people are going to be very happy that there's not going to be any pill bases in here. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the box art models here, some of these French infantrymen who are painted up. And honestly, I gotta say, guys, I think everyone can kind of agree with me when I say that the French have had some really great uniforms over the centuries. And I think it's kind of a low point in the World War II European theater. They used to have just so much those blues and those, for God's sake, the classic French Foreign Legion with the blue coat and the red pants, or the white pants and the white kepi. Such good contrast. Such awesome contrast and so nice to paint. The flat green all up and down of the European theater World War II. I don't want to say that it doesn't do the models justice because it's historically accurate. That's what they were. But there's just been so many good colors that aren't just, military garb colors that the French uniforms have had, and it's just not quite here on these ones. Bar the Chasseurs à Pied here. They at least have some of that blue in there. But you can probably get a little more creative with that officer kepi and some of the colonial troop caps there. So at least there's that. And hey, on the flip side, at least their entire uniform being that kind of field green color is going to make them easier to paint up. You could probably get a good close to matching color spray paints, maybe a Vallejo or something like that. Prime them in that color and then bam, their pants, coat, and helmet are already based. It's going to be a pretty quick paint up if you go that route. That's something I did with my British 8th Army, and they were just... I could sit down and do 10 guys in an evening, no issue. Okay, maybe a little bit of an issue. I'd have to have a few beers to get me through it, but you know what I mean. But much like the British 8th Army sprue here, we are going to have a variety of heads and equipment. It looks like mostly represented in the backpacks to represent different types of units, perhaps in the French army or even in the colonial theaters. And this is a really cool, creative, and innovative way that Warlord Games has gone about some of their newer sprues and representing the various units around the world that fought in the Second World War. I believe it started with that British 8th Army sprue where they were able to change out just the heads on a top section of one of the sprues. And then we saw it again with the Italians, which allowed you to do black shirts, then Bersaglieri, and then also Alpini. So it was almost the same sprue, but they would swap the heads 3 times. So you could really tailor your army, whatever it be, to have a very specific identity to it. Or you could mix and match, and if you didn't want to do 3 boxes of, say, Italian black shirts, you could do 1 of black shirts, 1 Bersaglieri, and then 1 Alpini. And you're kind of doing different things each time you build them, which is pretty cool. It's a very clever way of getting all those flavors in there, and I think at this point it's kind of becoming a trademark of Warlord Games and how they make their sprues. And honestly, I think it's brilliant. It's just really good. And on this screen here, you are going to be seeing several different types of French infantry here. We're going to have some with the standard French helmets, very iconic. You're going to see some with berets or bonnets. And then you're also going to see some there with the colonial North African hats. And of course, this can represent the chasseurs on foot that we mentioned earlier, or fortress troops, which I'm actually not quite familiar with. I'm assuming that's like Maginot Line. You have your engineers, of course, who are going to have landmines and stuff. And then, of course, with the colonial hats, you'll have your colonial troops. Now, if I do have one slight criticism over this kit, it's that I think the pants do look a little bit too baggy. These guys look kind of dummy thick on the lower quarters there. It looks a little more like Zouave's garb than it does the regular French uniform of the time. Yes, it was a little puffy, but I think the heroic scale here has blown it out a little bit, but that might also just be the paint job and the thing kind of blending together, being all the same color. Maybe that'll change a bit when you actually get to see them in person. Overall, it's not that big of a deal. I think it's just kind of the bolt-action Warlord game style of that heroic scale more so than anything else. But ultimately, that's my only real criticism, and it's not a deal breaker. I don't think it's too bad. You gotta let those boys breathe sometimes. But let's go ahead and take a look at the sprue itself, which I always love that Warlord Games just has a nice, clean image of the sprues, and that you can buy the sprues individually. It's always so nice. You can just look at it and see exactly what you want to build. Meanwhile, the newer Warhammer sprues look like hand grenade shrapnel that's gone off that I have to reassemble. But naturally here, you're going to get your standard Warlord Games, 6 bodies on the sprue. It looks like we have 3 in a sort of advancing position, 2 in a sort of firing position, and then 1 kneeling. We've got a great variety of heads here and enough heads to make them all whatever you want. So if you want colonial troops, you can give them 6 colonial heads. If you want helmets, you got 6 helmeted heads there. Enough variety to keep it fresh, but keep it homogeneous if you want it to be a single themed army. We're going to have 9 hands with rifles here, one of which has a grenade launcher on it. And we're also going to have 2 free-floating rifles, so you can have a huge variety of rifle posing, which is important for the French. You're going to see that they're a more early war-oriented army, and that usually means, more rifles, less automatics. After that, we are going to have 1 light machine gun, and then we are also going to have a submachine gun held at the side there, and then also a pistol. And I am a little iffy on the submachine gun there. Unfortunately, it's only 1 pose, and if I have to choose 1 pose for the 1 weapon on the sprue, I'd rather have it be a firing pose, or at least a kind of firing at the hip pose. I do like a good dynamic submachine gun pose every now and then, but if it's only one pose, I need it to be something that I can put on various models and have them look a little bit more unique. That NCO with the submachine gun is always going to be front and center of your squad whenever you're taking photos or moving them around the battlefield. And it is nice when you can have them all posed a little bit differently, especially with some of the more obscure weapons out there. You know, we don't see a lot of these French submachine guns, and we have Tommy guns to boot. And that is always a kit bashing alternative, but it would have been nice to have an extra submachine gun on this sprue. That's something I really, really loved about the British 8th Army kit. We had that early war Tommy gun, and we had it once in a firing pose, then also in a more dynamic pose, and it was just very versatile when you're making your NCOs and officers. But that probably is my only critique on the sprue itself. And, you know, like I said, French are very early war. They're not really stuffed to the brim with automatics. And I'm sure they took that into consideration when they were sculpting this kit. You're going to need a lot of rifles if you're playing French, and, well, c'est la vie. But overall, I wholeheartedly welcome the plastic French kit. It's a solid addition to the range reboot of Warlord Games, bringing their products up to line. And again, I hope this is going to bring more diversity to the tabletop with what factions people are playing in Bolt Action. I feel like it does get a little bit stale playing British, US, and German nonstop around the clock. I want to see more Italians out there. I want to see more French. And I think these newer updated kits are going to go a very, very long way in making that happen. But honestly, I want to see some more love when it comes to the faction rules for some of the quote-unquote lesser belligerents of World War II, whenever 3rd edition may roll out or whatever they want to do in the future. A little more personality in the rules will also go a very, very long way. Also, I've gotten a request since I did my last Plastic Italian video to go back and do a how to build this box video that I used to do. I do really love those videos. People seem to be very receptive of those. I would like to do that for these, although a little bit of a spoiler here with these kind of early mid-war factions, you can kind of just refer back to my British infantry box video. I know it's not the same as having all the cool visuals up there, but you know, a lot of the brick units for Bolt Action tend to be, you get your 10-man squad, you get your NCO with a submachine gun, and then you have your LMG and loader, and the rest are all riflemen. That's kind of just how it goes for early and mid-war. I try not to get into some of the more crazier campaign book units, but there's a slight deviation with the French where you have the rifle grenades, and I will say just build as many of those rifle grenades as you can, because you can always just run them as a rifleman. But I do plan on making videos for all these new plastic box sets on how I recommend building them. They'll be pretty quick. I just need to brush up on some of the more obscure rules with the Italians and the French. But I will likely be updating the Bolt Action unit guide before that comes out, because long overdue we are going to start taking a look at some of the officers and the other HQ options for Bolt Action, which I'm actually quite excited to get into. I feel like I've been ragging on Bolt Action a bit over the last year I've been doing videos, but there's good things here, and we're going to get to them. And this is definitely a start. So let me know what you guys think about the plastic French in the comment section down below. Do you have any plans to get this box set? What are you going with, colonial route? You going for invasion of France? You know, Maginot Line, Dunkirk kind of stuff. I'd like to hear what you guys are getting into with them. Personally, I do expect them to come out with another French unit box that's maybe going to have some more colonial stuff. Maybe something like Legionnaires or Zouaves. I'm not really sure if there were Zouaves even fighting at that point, but you know, the French have a pretty eclectic range of troops that they drew from, much like the British themselves. So, you know, there's going to be some Team Fortress 2 level of hat options here, and I'm looking forward to it. But as always, until next time, guys, take care.